One of the most important equations to understand is the equation of meaning. As a completely independent observer, one can create whatever meaning one wants. What's the meaning of a pinky? What's the meaning of a hammer hitting a pinky? What's the meaning of a finger, middle finger? It's whatever you make up the meaning to be. However, we are each on a number of continuums, and one of the more important continuums is the continuum of dependence or independence. So we have complete independence, complete dependence. Now, up here, where we're fully dependent, we must adopt the meaning of those we are dependent of. And when that's a cult or culture, when that's a family, then it is the power point or the majority. Now over here is the cult, the culture. And the culture assigns meaning to symbols it invents with language. So the culture divides the one into a grid with words. And everything that is one becomes a word. We call this a hand, right? And you know it's a joke, it's a little bit of an illusion, because the hand, you ask, what is a hand? You say, well, it goes from here to here. It has 5 of these things. It does this. And you say, okay, so that's a hand. And the hand is not an arm? No, it's not an arm. And the hand is not a torso? No, it's not a torso. It's a hand. So it's separate from these other things. But you know it's a joke because the hand doesn't work without an arm to hold it. And without a torso, without a heart to produce. So the hand isn't really real, any more than you could take a piece of geography and you can say that this is Utah and this is California. Why, right? Well, you divide the world up with words and you make up imaginary lines. So you have a map of meaning, but you also, you have Utah over here and you have California over here. Why? Because we said so, right? Why doesn't a hand begin here or here or here, right? Why doesn't Utah begin there? Why doesn't California begin there? It's meaningless, right? There's no good reason for any of this. It's just made up, right? It's a map of language. Now, you know it's not real because there's a lot that happens at the intersection of Utah and California, right? Rivers don't just stop at the edge of Utah. They continue flowing into California, nor do they just appear out of nowhere in California. They came from Utah. So the line between is an illusion. The interconnectivity of reality is real, right? But when you're part of a cult, when you're dependent on a cult, the lines are where the lines are because that's where they said they are. And they said they were there because someone else in the past said that's the way they were, right? And so that's how they are. That's how you know you're in a loop, you're in a circle. Something is the way it is because that's the way it is, and so it is. right? There's no reference point. So a cult gives meaning to things. And when you are dependent, what does that mean? It means that just as every infant who is born is dependent on a caregiver, a mother, a family, or they die. Right? Every human being that exists is at the very least dependent on their ancestors. Right? You can take 1,000 generations of a family and you can delete just one generation 2,000 years ago. And everything in front of that generation dies, ceases to exist. So it's a pretty strong dependency. You and I are dependent on specific people having sex thousands of years ago and not killing their children. And we're also dependent on numerous other people not killing their children. We're also dependent on an absence of tidal waves and an absence of earthquakes at that particular point, which could have killed out that pattern of energy, right? So we are dependent to varying degrees on our ecology. In another second, you're going to take an inhale of breath, making you completely dependent on the forest canopy of the earth, on the grass, on the plants that produce oxygen, nitrogen. We say oxygen, in fact, it's mostly nitrogen. So we're dependent every second on the shit of trees. Why shit? Well, we just call what is given out shit. That's not how the rest of the world sees it, right? We give out fertilizer. We give out nutrients. We take in shit, right? We eat the shit of the fields, right? The byproduct, the waste is the plant, is the fruit. That's nourishment to us. When we exhale, that's lung shit. That's what remains. That's what we have to give back to ecology. Now, why does shit have an unpleasant ring to it? Because it didn't have that ring to it when we were born, right? A Japanese kid hearing the word shit, it may even be a compliment in Japanese. It's certainly a compliment in some of the 10,000 languages, most of which are now extinct, each of which give different mouth sounds, a symbolic placeholder for describing parts of life. In some language, shit is the highest compliment imaginable, but how did we learn that shit was bad? Did we learn it from nature? No, right? Shit is the source of all life, right? Fertilizer, nitrogen, potassium, phosphate, organic matter, water, that's what shit is, mixed with soil is the source of all life. Trees, vegetables, lawns, all life depends on shit. So we didn't learn it from life. And what life has to give, for example, oxygen and nitrogen, that's the shit of trees. Right? Everything is a cycle, meaning energy is taken in one form, it's interacted with, it's transformed, its form changes, and it comes out in another form. And then another part of life takes that, transforms it, and it comes out in another form. And we just happen to call the energy we bring in food, liquid, nourishment. and we give out food, liquid, and nourishment for our ecology. And we call what comes in food, and we call what goes out piss and shit. The question is, where did we learn that these are disgusting? Because from where I'm sitting, they're the source of all life. And when we learned that, why didn't we question? I mean, you can take every curse. Well, what's a curse? A curse is a bad thing. Okay, you can take every curse word, fuck, shit, cunt, dirty. What is it? Bastard, bitch, and you find that they're the source of all life. Right? Bastard's a little bit of a miss in there, but you look at a bitch, female dog, source of life, expression of life. But particularly you look at the most common, a cunt, the source of all life. A dick, the source of all life. Right? A dickhead, the source of all life with a head. What are we dealing with? Fucking, the source of all life. Right? Procreation, sex, right? Fucking, connected, right? The source of all life. Shit, the source of all life. So, piss, right? Source of all life. In other words, if you give life, right, shit and piss, things grow. If you fuck with a cunt, life grows. So who tells you that these are bad words as opposed to blessings, right? Because scientifically, the source of all life is a blessing, particularly in a religious context. Well, where you can just switch paradigms. So in science, you just say, yeah, there would not be any life without fucking. There wouldn't be any life without cunts. There wouldn't be any life without piss, and there wouldn't be any life without shit. Right? Trees drop their leaves, shit, and create compost, source of all life. Trees give out oxygen and nitrogen, and that is the source of our life. So how do you take the foundation of life and turn it into something ugly? It's not easy. It is not easy. How do you take the most pleasurable thing a human being can do, which is fucking, and get humans who experience that to consider it a dirty word, which is another bizarre phenomena, because dirt is even more than fucking the source of all life. Now, if all of these were blessings, life would make sense. Or more accurately, life does make sense. These things are blessings. But if all of these were blessings in the eyes of the cult, then the culture would make sense. The culture is backwards, right? Because being stupid, I guess you have a certain amount of curse, of curse there, right? But it's much worse if it's fucking stupid. But fucking isn't stupid. fucking is the source of all life. Right? So how do you get a cult to rewire meanings to be directly backward? Well, it takes some doing. And the first thing it takes is the period of dependency. And everyone has that in childhood. They're 100% dependent. And while dependent, they download the grid of the cult. And the way the cult transfers emphasis and meaning is through impressions and reactions, right? So shit means nothing until you watch 1,000 people react to the word shit, right? So you have the word shit. Then over here, you have a couple of different quadrants. This one counts the number of reactions. So some things get reactions a lot. Let's just say this has 11,000 interactions. And sex is usually a very highly emphasized and reactive word, again, because it is, of course, the source of all life. But let's just say you have 11,000 impressions of reactivity that you've seen as an infant, as a child, as an adolescent around the word sex. And then you look at the intensity, which is 0 to 10. And let's say that most of them are in the 7 to 10 range. So the word has a 7 to 10 intensity of reaction. You've seen 11,000 interactions. And then you have the meaning. And then you have like a good or bad, right? So you have, these are all the meanings, the stories, and are the reactions positive or negative? In other words, you can create an equation around a word, which is just a random sound of a pattern that a cult has decided to give meaning. You can say 11,000 times 7 to 10 intensity. And then the meanings can be a jumble of different things, 30% this, 40% that. It's very odd, particularly with words like sex or money. You have all these people talking about, oh, that rich jerk, and then you have all these people, that good, nice, rich person, philanthropist, and then this. So all these different things. So you have all these mixed messages around it. And then you have the percentage that are good or bad. Right? So you have all these people saying, well, we need more sex, or you got to go out and have sex, and this and that and the other. And then you have that dirty, that creep, just interested in having sex, So you have all these different things. And then let's say down here that sex is 70% good and 30% evil and terrible, right? So then you've got your equation here. So you've got 30% of it evil and terrible. Let's say that the most intense reactions were to the evil and terrible versions of sex. So that those are like tens, and that the pleasant reactions are, sevens. Well, now that doubles to where 60% of the intensity is on the negative side. And so the word sex will have a cautionary feel, because what you do is you watch people, you say sex, and they look around, some in terror, some in guilt, some in what's going to happen, what's someone going to say, what does that mean? They're whispering, but that's because they're talking about sex. You have all of this reactivity. Now, if you're in a dependent state and you need to mesh, you need to merge with the majority, you've got to take this entire equation into your body and agree to internalize all that meaning and all that equation. So that now when someone says sex, you have all that chaos, all that noise going on in your body, so that you're now in sync. You're now part of the network of shared protocols and shared meanings, right? Now, the trouble is that a lot of the meanings are not only, out and out lies, as whether it's pretending that there's these imaginary lines, whether it's depending that this is my property and that's your property and they have nothing to do with each other, but I'm playing loud music on my property and you're hearing it on your property, like pretending that California and Utah have nothing to do with one another, but if they put poison in the river in Utah, it flows into California and kills California agriculture. If you put nuclear waste in the air in Russia, it travels around the world and you have nuclear waste around the world. So these are jokes, right? They're not separate places. But we're asked to pretend that they are. We're asked to behave in a way that they are. And what's the problem? What does a cult do? What do parents do? What do teachers do if you start challenging the line? This is the bottom line. This is how it is. If you start saying, no, it's not actually there, that's a bad model. The response is typically punishment, which to a child, an infant, is traumatic. A giant takes a ruler and hits you on the arm. Right? So you learn not to question that line. Right? And the line is everywhere. This clothing is okay, this isn't. Why? Because we said so. Right? This is California, why? This is mine, this is yours. Why? And then there's always some reason, but is that the best reason to draw the line there? Not necessarily. Why are these people throwing out half of their food and these people are starving? Well, it's perfectly simple. The line says the food is theirs and it isn't there. But why? Right? All of these systems collapse if you question the line. A hand is not a hand if you question the line. Just cut your hand off here and see how well it works. Is it even yours if you cut it off? Right? Does that even make sense? That was my hand when it was attached. Right? It wasn't really a hand, it was an ecology. It was part of an ecology. So once you plug into a network, you're exchanging meanings, you're exchanging narratives within that network. And you get benefit. You get what's called the network effect, right? If you will design a piece of software that runs on Microsoft Windows, you plug into a network and you get access to all the computers that run on Microsoft Windows. If you create a better piece of software that runs on a better operating system that nobody's using, you have a network of one, a superior technology, but a network of one. Right? And at what point is it better to be part of an inferior technology or an inferior network and dumb down the technology? And at what point is it better to have superior technology and a smaller network? Right? That is the question. Now let's say that this has, a 10,000 unit impact. Now, we haven't developed the mathematics or measured the mathematics of psychology because we're part of an outward-looking cult where what's happening in the outer world is viewed as more important than what's happening in our inner experience. But if we have 1,000 units of impact that we've internalized, and we say the word sex over here, this entire equation that we've witnessed, all the movies, all the reactions, will have a 10 or 11,000 units of impact. Now, if we say a virgin word, pigwing, what's pigwing? Right, well, you could break it down in pig and wing, but pigs don't have wings, so let's just pretend it's a virgin word. Pigwing. Now, if we say the word pigwing, there's 0, unless there is a huge cult influence on what's called nonsense. Right? So nonsense is a charged word in the cult. The cult has decided to treat nonsense with contempt. So if there are 1,000 contemptuous associations with the word nonsense, and nonsense has been given to mean the absence of meaning, gibberish, then pigwing might have that connotation. I don't want to be associated with nonsense because I don't want 700 impressions of contempt or 9,000 impressions of contempt. Right? So whatever cult that we belong to is our network, whatever family, whatever cult. The network, for reasons that are at times bizarre, decides to ascribe meanings that are almost always false and sometimes, incredibly insane, backwards. Like imagine if you believed the cult and said that fucking, fuck you, dirty, shit, piss off, jerk. What is a jerk? Someone who masturbates, right? Enjoys themselves. Imagine that you really believed the cult and said that these were all terrible things to be gotten rid of. So you get rid of all the dirt, get rid of all the sex, right? Get rid of all the pleasure, right? All the fertilizer. So no dirt, no fertilizer, no sex, right? You've got nothing. The Big Bang doesn't even get into the first positions of fusion, where different distinct energies have sex with each other and create new energies. You don't even get that far. So that's reality. That's science. But cults are not scientific. They're cults, right? Now, if you say that, hey, you're all fucked up cult members, right? And it's like, what do you use if fucked up is actually a compliment? It doesn't make sense, right? So you have to say you're all unfucked. Right? You're the opposite of fucked. You don't exist, right? But then the cult, we're trying to plug into the network the cult of English, which in many cases doesn't make sense because it's correlated with a cult, with a tradition of strange nonsense, right? So here we have the benefit of nonsense. The more dependent, so this whole thing creates the cult equation. Now, how much you believe the cult equation is a function of how dependent you are. If you are 100% dependent as a child, you believe it without question and you accept it unconditionally and you go along with it. The authority figure says this is the way it is, you do it. You are a sheep. Now at 50% independence, you say that's a bunch of bullshit, but I still may or may not do it because, you know, even though it's a dumb law, I don't want to go to prison, right? When you can have your life destroyed by a cult, it doesn't matter if you are right. What matters is, does a superior pattern of energy take your freedom, take your life, take and disrupt your family? They do, right? SWAT teams surround your house. It doesn't matter if you're right. You know, we see that in the United States over the last 40 years, where taking a puff of marijuana is better for the body, better for the society, better for the family, better for the economy, better for our humanity than spending $100,000 of taxpayer money to break up a family, put someone out of work, and put them behind bars. But it doesn't matter if you are correct, if you are surrounded by a SWAT team with superior force that will kill you, if you do not comply with their agenda of wasting millions of dollars of taxpayer money to lock you up for a protocol that is flawed, right? You go along with that or you die, right? Then you get charged for resisting arrest, right? You know, so you... right? So you get punished, and you will get punished as long as you are in a dependent state. One of the things that you will also notice in any cult is that people at the top of the cult power structure never punish themselves, right? Because they don't have to. Now, for example, the President of the United States is not at the top of the power structure, right? The military could still punish them, right? The military is a lot stronger than the president. The intelligence agencies could assassinate, as in the case of Kennedy. You're not at the top of the power structure. An assassin can take... So there's relatively few instances where you really are at the top of a power structure. But in those instances where they are, right? Mom says that anyone who eats a cookie before dinner is going to get a spanking. Well, when you catch mom eating a cookie secretly, does she spank herself? Of course not. Right? Does she arrest herself? No, right? Does the DA say, you know what? Lock me up. I cheated on my taxes last year. No. Take away my driver's license. I've been speeding. You haven't caught me, but no, right? So there are power structures that, when you are in a dependent relationship, utilizes that dependence to reinforce the network in the areas that the network is intelligent, and importantly, in the areas that the network is insane, pathological, stupid, and crazy. When there is complete dependence, the dependency is used by those at the top of the power structure to enforce the network, to reestablish this is the way it is. This is the order. And that will continue until a force equal or greater than that network engages with that network and destroys that order, right? And with it, the intelligent portion of the order and the insane portion of the order. But if you are down here in zero dependency, now these words are lies. There is no zero dependency, right? You know, if one person was successful in starting a nuclear war, right? Well, how do you do that, right? Well, let's say one person could dedicate 10 years, 5 years of their life and actually get one nuclear missile to launch at another power with nuclear missiles, right? If they could hack in and stop it from jamming and just start World War III, you're not independent. And anyone could do that, right? Say all the trees decide stop producing nitrogen and oxygen. Or a virus comes out that eliminates all plant matter on Earth. All the oxygen, nitrogen stops being produced, and as the plants die, carbon dioxide is produced and we all die, right? So we're not really ever in an independent state. But when it comes to thinking freely and claiming our own bodies, as we move towards financial independence, which is also a joke, right? Well, I put it in this bank, and this bank. But the entire banking sector went down, or that country's economy went down, or someone hacked all of it. What then, right? You put some here and some there, and what if someone found it and stole it? Right? You have a reserve over here and here, and what if you get hit by a bus? What if you're framed for a crime you didn't commit and you didn't know to protect yourself because you didn't commit the crime, so you didn't know you were framed? And then you're arrested and presented with a mind-blowing amount of evidence that's just been digitally inserted in your file, right? And you don't know the reason it was done, so you can't defend and point to a hypothesis. You can just say, yeah, it makes absolutely no sense, but there you are. So we're not really independent, but if we can get to a point where we do not believe we will die, somewhere around here where we're not 100% dependent, where we have reasonable odds that we can think and we can speak freely, if we can get to that point where we can think and speak freely without imminent threat of death. Now, it's not entire, right? Because there are some areas, for example, you look at, which country can I go to and take any kind of plant medicine that I wish, right? Marijuana has been used for thousands of years on the planet. DMT, thousands of years on the planet. Mushrooms, thousands of years on the planet. Where can I go to just engage with plants the way I want to? Is there any country on Earth, right? You can keep it a secret, right? But what if it got out? What if it got out, right? And so the degree to which we can think freely individually, speak freely and individually, is dependent on two variables. This access, rich people generally have the blessing of a lot more freedoms, but they often also have a lot more to lose. So you have the combination of independence and cult messaging. But if you are completely dependent up here, and you've been raised with 10,000 meanings associated with this sound, and you hear that sound, your body, your psychology, your behavior will react as if 10,000 people are all saying, do this now. This is the only way it should be done. Do it now. Right? And we wonder why people can be brainwashed to kill their own family, to kill other human beings who aren't harming them. Like, let's just go halfway around the world and kill innocent men and children. What does it take to brainwash an individual who wants to do the right thing into napalming innocent women and children who do not know what's going on, who mean them no harm, who have never done any harm, and who have no capacity to do any harm? What does it mean to burn a child alive because your cult told you so, because your government told you so? Right? If you are reasonably dependent on your network, and your network has said a lot of good things about war, talked about how important it is to do what you're told, and then somebody tells you to go kill those children, then you go and kill those children because you're a child. You're in a dependent state, in a network relationship with a cult that has an identity, that has a pattern. And many of those patterns are right and many of those patterns are wrong. All of them are lies. Some of them take you in a good direction, some of them take you in a bad direction. None of them are really true. Nothing you can put into words is 100% true. But it can take you in a direction of suffering or a direction of well-being. And it is remarkable. It is remarkable that a church could have as its commandment, thou shalt not kill, and send people out to kill, praying to God to win, which means to kill more people than they killed of yours. But if you are in a childlike state with a church, where the church punishes anyone who questions authority, they can ask their children to go insane. Parents ask children to go insane every single day. Right? But to the child, the ultimate program they're listening to is do what you're told, because I said so. When will you do the wrong thing that you know and believe to be wrong? Because you're ordered to do so by a power structure. Right? We blame the Germans for following Hitler. But what about the unnecessary bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Do we blame anyone for creating nuclear hell for a country? For creating PTSD for an entire country? Right? We're told not to, so we don't. Right? We're never fully independent because we are all plugged into networks. We all need networks. We're using the oxygen network, the food network, the language, the English network, the legal network that we're a part of. We're using the internet network. So if we cross a line in any of those networks and we're cut off, no more oxygen, no more money. We're in the capitalist network. No more money, no more oxygen, no more freedom. If you're cut off from a network you depend on, you either die, in which case you're not very useful in responding or reforming the network, or you conform to the network, in which case you become part of what's wrong within every network. Right? Because particularly every cultural network in the history of humanity is and has been wrong 100% of the time if you really nitpick, and has been more wrong than right, at least 30% of the time. So then the networks that are winning are the bigger ones, the most sociopathic. If sociopathic networks are winning in that environment more than empathic networks, right? You arrive in a new country and they greet you as a friend. They're using an empathic network. You give them disease, surprise them, and kill them. That's a sociopathic. When a sociopath and an empath come together blindly, the sociopath always wins if that stays the same, right? Just may take a little bit of time for a sociopath to kill, undermine, poison all of the various people or factions until that network collapses.